Sorry about that. I was wool gathering. I'll explain in a moment. I'm Charles Freedman. Welcome to News Talk on Santa Cruz Voice. Lovely Thursday morning. We're out off to the races for the next 3 hours, 9 to noon. News Talk here on Santa Cruz Voice with yours truly. Telephone number to reach the program is 831-265-5050. So what was so important that I was distracted and didn't hit my theme music on time? Well, you know, I always go to Real Clear Politics every morning, and this time I was doing that. I was looking at various things, and I happened to notice somebody had conducted a poll on the question of whether California voters would be willing to go along with Gavin Newsom's idea for short-circuiting our independent commission, his legislature draw ultra gerrymandered House districts. And evidently the poll shows that a very strong 2/3, like 2-1, California voters are not happy with this, do not want to do this. So in order to effect this change, since it is part of the California state constitution, Governor Newsom would need to get a ballot measure with voter approval. And frankly, I have never thought he was going to get it, and now that I see the results of this poll, I am even more certain that he won't get it. Now, what does that mean in practical terms? Well, all of this noise, and boy, oh boy, does he know how to make noise. All of this noise that Governor Newsom has been making about, well, if Republicans redraw other states, we're going to redraw in California and negate everything. No, you're not. Because you can't. And the people of the state of California are not going to give you the authority to do so. So go sit down, Governor Newsom. Of course, he won't do that, but just the same, you get the picture. So that was what I was looking at, and it gave me cheer. And I was thinking to myself, huzzah, and then I looked up and noticed that 9:06 had come and gone, and it was high time for me to begin my program. So sorry about that. What else did I find? There's a little bit of a personnel fight. I'm talking about this for a couple of reasons. First of all, this has to do with the Food and Drug Administration. One of the people, as a matter of fact, the only major nominee to a cabinet position that Donald Trump made that I would have opposed was that of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to head the, he's Secretary of Health and Human Services, I think it is. Bobby Kennedy is an unreconstructed political leftist. And granted, he supported Mr. Trump in the election. He made a deal. And I respect deals, and Donald Trump is a man who makes deals. That's how hey, I'm the deal maker. Bobby Kennedy had been running as a Democrat for president. The Democratic Party froze him out of that, as we all know, as they froze Bernie Sanders out a couple of times. The Democratic Party is, if anything, very undemocratic. Anyway, Bobby Kennedy was a victim of that. Decided, okay, I'll run as an independent. And at first it looked like he might get a few votes, enough to make a difference. But rapidly, as often happens with third-party independent candidacies, the air went out of his. And presently he found that he was polling at 1 or 2%, negligible numbers. But he still had that name, the Kennedy name, and, a platform. People understood who he was, and he got his quotes were put in the newspapers. So I don't know which approached which. Probably Trump approached Kennedy. Said, hey, I got an idea for you. I got a deal for you. Here's a deal. You give up your independent candidacy and support me. Because Trump saw that it was going to be a close election. And after all, it was. He beat, what's her name, Harris, by 2 points in the popular vote. 2 points. That's no landslide. That's a close election. And Bobby Kennedy had been polling at around 2 points. So this was not a stupid thing for Trump to do. It was a very smart thing for Trump to do. So he goes to Bobby Kennedy and says, here's what you do. You give up your candidacy for president, and what do you want? And Bobby Kennedy said, I would like to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. And Donald Trump said, you got a deal. You support me. If I win, I appoint you HHS. Hands were shaken, a deal was made, and the deal was kept. Bobby Kennedy gave up his campaign, supported Donald Trump for president, and when he won, Donald Trump nominated to be HHS secretary. So, two honorable men. But the problem is that Bobby Kennedy is one of those people who, in general, is not comfortable with or happy about the idea of promoting new and novel cures for things. It's kind of the opposite of what Mr. Trump did in his first administration. Remember, he signed a thing called the Right to Try Act? Do you recall that? I do. And I thought this was something that was long overdue. It specified that for people who were suffering from chronic conditions, I heard of some remedy that had been approved, and was being used by people in other places, and the person was interested in it, but they couldn't use it here in the United States because the FDA wouldn't approve it. So here's this person in chronic pain or maybe dying, and there's a treatment available if they want to try, and the government comes in and says, no, you can't do that. Once again, an instance of the state coming between people who want to make a transaction. Somebody has this substance, it's for sale. A willing buyer comes along, government comes along, oh, no, you can't do that. Donald Trump said, yes, you can. So he signed this Right to Try Act, giving people the right to try a novel treatment regimen or prescription. Says it's your life, it's your money. It's your choice. Wow. A piece of federal legislation actually based on the concept of the state respecting an individual's freedom of choice and freedom to act. Phenomenal. Mr. Kennedy is not of the same mind. Today, the Wall Street Journal has a piece here rather critical of Dr. Marty Makary. Does the Food Commissioner, Marty Makary, want to accelerate life-saving drugs, as he claims? The agency's recent torpedoing of an immunotherapy shot for advanced melanoma and slow rolling a treatment for a rare disease raised big questions. FDA's approval of new drugs has notably slowed this year. This is something that I had hoped the Trump administration would facilitate. Let me see. Annual novel drug approvals averaged 52 per year in the first Trump presidency, 48 under Joe Biden. There have been only 22 this year so far. Current trend, that would make 38 for the year. A serious decline. One concern is that regulators are nixing drugs under the false flag of raising scientific standards. A case in point, Replimune's melanoma treatment, which the FDA rejected last month. About a third of patients who hadn't responded to prior immunotherapy showed a strong response to Replimune's in a clinical trial. Tumors shrank in nearly all patients. Responses proved durable over 3 years. Serious side effects were rare. Oncologists who treated patients in the trial hailed the results, yet the FDA said the trial was not considered to be adequate and well-controlled clinical investigation that provides substantial evidence of effectiveness. Its quibble is that the trial lacked a control group. Vinay Prasad, head of the biologic division, has long criticized such single-arm studies that have no placebo groups. He believes medicine should undergo randomized controlled trials that track patients over longer periods to measure overall survival. Never mind if patients die in the meantime. It's unethical to give patients with an advanced deadly disease a treatment that failed to help them as a placebo. Measuring overall treatment survival would also require drug makers to run bigger trials and over longer periods, delaying access to potentially life-saving therapies. Replimune executives said they were blindsided by the FDA rejection and its shifting post hoc demands, moving the goalposts. Leading oncologists lambasted the FBI, urged the agency to reconsider. Replimune's results are unprecedented. Vishal Patel, a dermatology oncologist at George Washington University, wrote to Dr. Makary this month. Physicians urgently want and need this agent. Based on the data they've seen, University of Iowa oncologist Mohammed Miem wrote in another letter, indeed, the precedent set by this rejection is likely to halt, many aspects of the science and clinical development required to move agents like this into practice in later line disease. The world looks for leadership from the FDA based on rationality, science, and evidence, wrote Melanoma World's Alex Hauschild. Doing a randomized controlled trial would be considered as unethical in his home country of Germany. The Wall Street Journal criticized Dr. Prasad, who was appointed by Dr. Makary, for using dubious safety risks in an effort to scuttle a gene therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. After a public backlash, the FDA backed down. Dr. Prasad resigned, yet Dr. Makary recently brought him back. This followed a Stat News story in which FDA officials blamed for the Replimune rejection on Richard Posdur, the agency's head of oncology, but Dr. Prasad's shop was directly responsible for the Replimune review, and his career staff supported approval. In any case, the buck stops with Dr. Makary. The finger-pointing and his continued support for Dr. Prasad is creating tremendous uncertainty for pharmaceutical developers. If Mr. Makary really wants to make drug approvals for deadly and rare diseases faster and more flexible, by ordering the FDA to reconsider Replimune's treatment. He would also greenlight stealth biotherapeutics treatment for Barth syndrome, which the bureaucracy is strangling. Barth syndrome causes a fatal weakening of the heart muscles and immune system. It affects about 150 Americans. That's a tiny, tiny number out of our population, but just imagine if you were one of them or one was in your family. It's the sort of rare disease therapy that Dr. Makary says he wants to bring to the market more quickly. Stealth moved for approval in January 2024. FDA Advisory Committee last autumn found the drug to be effective, but the agency keeps changing its demands and has deployed one excuse after another to delay approval. The agency recently told Stealth to resubmit its application, which would take another 6 months. Stealth CEO Renee McCarthy says her company might not survive that long. If the company fails, patients that began receiving the medicine in the trial will lose access. Others may never benefit. Parents of children in Stealth's trial are urging FDA to approve it. So are both Democrats and Republicans in Congress. I have lost 2 boys with Barth syndrome. I know firsthand how lethal it is. Shelley Bowen of South Carolina tells us. Do FDA leaders care? Does Dr. Makary? Now, that was in the Wall Street Journal today. I find on Real Clear Politics a piece from Gabe in Politico. Trump's chief fights effort to split Maha and MAGA. Now, what are we talking about here? So, according to this, this is from Politico. Bear in mind, Politico is a very, left-oriented, we hate Trump website. So keep that in mind. Keep the source in mind. According to this, Dr. Prasad was rehired because of interference from Susie Wiles. Now, who is Susie Wiles? Well, that's Trump's chief of staff, and she is a very serious person. She has been keeping the Trump White House moving much more smoothly than his first administration. and is generally credited with helping make sure that the president stays on the rails, which is not an easy thing to do. Anyway, this piece credits one Laura Loomer with being the one who facilitated Prasad's dismissal. Laura Loomer has been referenced occasionally on this program. She and people like Steve Bannon, they constitute what I think is really a self-appointed arbiter of MAGA orthodoxy. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Thank you, dear Lord, for those words. Anyway, I'm suspicious of this because at no point in this piece is the Wall Street Journal mentioned, and the Wall Street Journal's editorial page is more influential in U.S. affairs and opinion than Laura Loomer is. This fact is known. So this goes on a little ways, but the one thing that comes out of this that I'd like to share with all of you, if you look at the menu item here on Real Clear Politics, it says, Trump's chief fights effort to split Maha and MAGA. It made me think of Maha and Aha. So here's what you do. Go to your, go to YouTube. Go to YouTube, and where it says search, type in Maha Aha. M-A-H-A space A-H-A. Maha Aha. Got it? Now hit enter. A 4-minute clip, 4.5 minutes or so, will come up. Watch it, and if you don't laugh, you ain't human. Enough said. Okay, let us... Oh, 9:24. Well, we're just a whisker early for our first break. Oh, gosh, I forgot to bring up the call screen. Oh, well, yesterday we didn't get any callers until the third hour, so there's probably nobody there. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. 831-265-5050. And I would certainly urge you to avail yourself of that number. There we go. Trying to make my commercials come up here so that I can use them. Let's go ahead and do that right now. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
The Scotts Valley Chamber of Commerce presents the 25th Annual Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival, August 16th and 17th at Sky Park in Scotts Valley. 2 days of fun for the whole family with food, fine art, a kids' fun zone, and live music, including the Joint Chiefs and the Lost Boys featuring James Durbin. Join us Saturday for the Cops and Rodders Car Show with over 100 vintage cars on display. And don't miss Dog Day Sunday with contests for all canines. All this and free admission to the Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival. See you there.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
It's hot up here. Hi, folks. Warren Knox here of Knox Roofing. Yes, it really does get hot up here, but it's okay because Knox team has been sweating it out on rooftops for 30 summers to make certain your roof will keep you warm and dry through the winter. If you have any doubt about your roof will weather the winter, call Knox Roofing today and ask about a free rooftop inspection. We love it up here. 461-0634. Thanks, folks.
The Santa Cruz County Fair starts Wednesday, September 10th, but now's the time to enter your best canning, baking, quilts, Legos, art, photography, flowers, fruits and vegetables, or favorite collections. Most entries close August 21st. Entry information is available at SantaCruzCountyFair.com. And while you're there, check for pre-sale ticket offers. Get your ticket packages, enter the fair, and we'll see you at
the Santa Cruz County Fair.
9:27. on the Charles Freedman radio program this lovely Thursday. Telephone number remains 831-265-5050. Give us a call when you get a chance. I ran into a piece yesterday. I'm still following this mayoral contest in New York City. We talked about it occasionally on the program. I'd like to shine a little light on it again. There are a couple of realities, political realities, surrounding this. The scariest one is that Zohran Mamdani is pretty likely to be the next mayor of New York. Now, one thing that I'm kind of curious about, in the primary election, where Mamdani triumphed over others to win the Democratic nomination for mayor of New York, we had ranked choice voting. And this benefited Mr. Mamdani. Some of the other people selected him. In the general election, now we had the primary several weeks ago. The Democrats and the Republicans each chose their nominee, and there are a couple of independents running. Former Governor Cuomo and incumbent Mayor Adams. Both of these are nominal Democrats, but they're running as independents because the Democrat nomination has gone to Mr. Mamdani. Okay, in New York you can do that. So there's basically 4 candidates for mayor. Here's what I haven't heard a peep about. Ranked choice voting. Everybody's talking as if, well, Mr. Mamdani is running ahead of these other. It's essentially 1 socialist and 3 non-socialists. Now, if that is the way the vote is breaking, then that gives Mamdani a tremendous advantage. If you're running as a voice for something unpopular, you can't get to 50%. What can you do? Maybe you can get to 42%. But if the vote against you is split not 2 ways, but 3 ways, well, it's almost impossible to lose. So one thing no one is talking about now is ranked choice voting. So I guess, from what I observe, it seems to me that ranked choice voting is employed in New York State primary elections, but not in the general election. And that makes no damn sense, does it? Either you have ranked choice voting or you don't. Now, frankly, I don't like ranked choice voting. I've urged my listeners to oppose it. But that's not the issue here. The issue is, does it exist in New York State or New York City? And if so, is it only applicable at the primary election and not in the general election? That sounds utterly weird to me. But there's not a single person speculating that, well, with a ranked choice voting system, the people voting for the losing candidates, the running fourth right now is Mayor Adams. If Adams' supporters were all to put their second place votes, their second choice votes, to Cuomo. And then what happens under ranked choice voting? Well, if the first, the lowest person is eliminated, his second choice votes are allocated, still no one has 50%. So you go to the next person. That would be probably Republican Curtis Sliwa. And at that point, they look at the people who voted for Sliwa. Who's your second choice? And I would assume that very few of them would have for their second choice Zohran Mamdani. They might have Adams, but of course his votes have already been allocated. So then a significant number of extra votes would go to Cuomo. Maybe he'd be able to pull it out. But again, the way I'm reading this, it's just going to be a straight 4-way split vote, which would mean that Mamdani is going to be elected. This is once again an illustration of an old adage of American politics, which I first learned by reading Theodore H. White's Making of the President 1960. And the first time I read that book, I think I was in 8th grade. And it was like 1964. And oh boy, this is a neat book. The adage is, you can't beat somebody with nobody. In other words, if you have a candidate who's got some kind of presence and a message, if your candidate running against him is is dull as dishwater and is utterly overshadowed by that candidate, going to lose. So Ron Mamdani, every time I see him, for one thing, I'll credit him with this. He's always smiling. Smile is an attractive thing. You say, wait a minute, smile has nothing to do with politics. Democrats, Republicans, we all smile, or don't. That's true. In politics, you're trying to gather people in. Mr. Trump doesn't always seem to realize that, but that's the name of the game, to bring people in. So you smile. A smile is attractive. Trust me. If you don't think it's true, do a little more thinking. I understand there's nothing political about it. I'm not saying there is. I'm saying there's something attractive about a smile. When I think of Mamdani, I think of a smiling guy. When I think of Cuomo, Sliwa, and Adams, I don't see any smiles at all. Not one. And Cuomo, for God's sake, a former governor who had to leave the office in midterm, disgraced over sexual misbehaviors and unwanted attentions, and whose terms, plural, as governor of New York were marked by essentially leftist extremism. Now he's presenting himself as the great white knight to save the city from socialism. Please, Mr. Hemingway. If the Democrats had an, shall I use the word establishment candidate with a little more attractiveness, a little more novelty, a little more communicating ability. Andrew Cuomo is an aging political harlot, and he looks like one. You know, you can put all the lipstick you want on him. He's still Sally Stanford on a bender. So what are the people going to get with Mamdani? Well, I have an analysis here from Daniel Schuchman, who looks into the question of what do you get with a socialist. Why has socialism remained resilient as a political idea? How can a socialist candidate be the front runner in a race for mayor of America's largest and ostensibly most capitalist city? Other candidates across the country have embraced the label, often softened with the soothing democratic prefix, democratic socialist. What was once a disqualifying ideological association in the U.S. can make a candidate seem cool to many voters, especially young voters. More than 2 decades ago, political thought predicted that notwithstanding the triumph of free enterprise, it will not be difficult for socialism to change its now quaint name a bit and revive government economic control into a newly compelling political, economic, and ultimately cultural agenda. Wow. It don't work, but it's coming. Since American children and college students weren't being taught what happened under actual socialist regimes, it was only a matter of time before simplistic slogans attacking private property, billionaires, and profits before people would be successfully revived by a smooth-talking demagogue. In a 2002 paper and a 2003 speech for the Atlas Society, Alan Charles Core, now an emeritus professor at the University of Pennsylvania, foretold how and why this could happen. Mr. Core lamented that socialism had yet to be held accountable for the scale of its crimes. No cause ever in the history of mankind has produced more cold-blooded tyrants, more slaughtered innocents, and more orphans than socialism with power. The failure to acknowledge and come to terms with this reality in the West, he believed, eventually would allow socialism to resuscitate itself even with millions of skeletons hiding in plain view. Zohran Mamdani, the New York Democratic mayoral candidate, has proposed government-run grocery stores as a hallmark of his campaign. This is a perplexing platform because, as Mr. Core reminded us, socialism, collectivism of agriculture alone led to untold suffering and starvation of millions. Now, is Mamdani proposing a takeover of farming and the establishment of gulags, as the Soviets did in Ukraine in the 1930s. No, the mayor of New York City does not have that power, but the embrace of an innocuous-sounding, half-baked program of government-controlled food distribution, keeping prices low, not making a profit. This idea that the word profit is an evil thing. I have been watching this for years. I don't know if you'll remember this or not. Jeez. It didn't last long. There was a very brief television series. The name of it was Profit. And it was about this reprehensible individual who slept in a cardboard box. I kid you not. And during his waking hours was an absolutely amoral fiend who did terrible things. His name was Prophet. The show didn't last long. I remember watching it. I think maybe 6-8 episodes or something like that. But every time I looked at it, I mean, it was so gross that it was engrossing. But every time I looked at it, I would think to myself, how many people who do not have historical background, my knowledge, are looking at this and thinking, Prophet, yeah, Prophet is bad. Look at this guy, Prophet, look at what he does. And that was just one tiny little example of how, over a period of years, an entire couple of generations have grown up being exposed to this constant drumbeat that somehow profits are a bad thing. Nobody ever bothers to explain to them that profits are only a bad thing. Well, I guess, no, not even. I was going to say in third person. If it's somebody else's profit. That's not a bad thing. Another guy making money, that's not bad. You making money, that's not bad. But what is bad is when you're pointed at somebody else, look at him, he's making money. Aren't you envious? The idea is not, why don't you do as well as he is? Make more money than he does. Outperform him. No, the idea is pull him down to your level. If he's successful and you're not, or you're less successful, then that's not a good thing. And somehow government should come in and take away what he has above what you have and make it all equal. Well, think about him, for instance. Maybe he put out a lot of time, effort, and energy. Employed talents that, maybe his talents are superior to yours. Maybe he actually knows more or has skills that you don't have. Doesn't make any difference. He's making a profit. That's bad. Drives me crazy. Keeping prices low, not making a profit, Mamdani's campaign website says. It's disturbing for what it reveals about his knowledge and mindset. As Mr. Kaur noted, whenever socialism was implemented, its vision was the abolition of private property, economic inequality, and the allocation of capital and goods by free markets culminated in the crushing of individual economic, religious, societal, and occupational freedom. Mr. Mamdani's lack of embarrassment at identifying himself as a socialist speak volumes. Mr. Kaur cited an incontrovertible lesson of history, which is that adding marketing adjectives to socialism doesn't change its inherent character. Whatever the ideals, whatever the inherent intentions, whatever the source of early socialist convictions, socialism will always lead to serfdom and the sacrifices of multitudes. Democratic socialism, National Socialism, Popular Socialism. There's a little thing here that I happened to look at. Thought this was kind of funny. What is the difference between democracy and socialist democracy? It's the same as the difference between a chair and an electric chair. That's a little sally that came out of Eastern Europe during the days of its enthrallment to the Soviet Union, at which time each of the governments, Poland was the Democratic People's Socialist Poland, the same thing in Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia, all these various countries maintaining socialist governments. And what socialism meant, in practical terms, was a police state. Socialism will always lead to serfdom and the sacrifice of multitudes. No shame is evident in Mr. Mamdani's choice to associate with history, a product of ignorance or political commitment. He and his fellow travelers seem adept at what Mr. Kaur described as the intellectual and political art form of denial or minimization of communist crimes. Given the Soviet, Chinese, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and other disasters in socialist experimentation that were collapsed or being revealed in the 1980s and 90s, it might have seemed unimaginable in the early 2000s that the catchphrases of this ideology would have popular resonance. But memories fade and education matters when Mr. Kaur warned that our children do not know what happened in any domain under socialism in power. Mr. Mamdani at that time was 12 years old, a student in elite New York schools. Long before Zohran Mamdani was at Bowdoin College, majoring in Africana studies, Mr. Kaur wrote that the humanities in general have become schools of oppression studies in the very societies that have extended more freedom, choice, and bounty than humanity has ever known. Everyone who cares about this should take one afternoon to wander the aisles of required reading at a local college bookstore. What a novel concept. Go in and see what, examine the syllabus of the various classes. It's far worse than you surely think, even if you're a pessimist. Mr. Kaur's warnings about education have proved, if anything, understated. No wonder free rent and profitless prosperity resonate with a generation that knows little of collectivist and its social and economic progress in the capitalistic societies possible. We have raised a generation, or now a couple of them, so woefully uninformed that when some Pied Piper comes along and says, hey, free rent, free child care, free groceries, instead of having the good, healthy skepticism that an educated, oh yeah, who provides that? Who does pay for it? At what cost? Mamdani evidently thinks it comes out of the ceiling. Oh, no, he actually has an answer for the question. We get all of this by taxing the rich. We will tax the rich, tax the rich. And he does not mince words. What I just gave you was an absolute quote. Tax the rich. Does he really believe that wealthy people are going to sit still for that? For one thing, wealthy people in New York, rich people in New York, already pay a tremendous share of the tax burden in that city. The top tax rate in New York City is something like, let me see, if you include federal, state, and local, you're well up over 50%. Lower income people don't pay that tax rate, but the wealthy do. This fiction that somehow wealthy people do not pay their fair share of taxes in high tax areas like New York, California, statistics prove that's not true. But it doesn't keep demagogues from continuing to repeat it and uninformed people from continuing to embrace it. I don't know in this regard. Ultimately, Mr. Kaur wrote the failure to study, teach, and embrace liberal society, There is nothing liberal about socialism. There is nothing liberal about the modern left. Liberalism is the secular political religion of the United States of America. I believe it's in Tocqueville's book, Democracy in America, that came out 1830 or so. I believe Tocqueville at one time observed all Americans are liberals of one stripe or another. Bear in mind at that time, a conservative was a monarchist. A conservative was somebody who believed in kings, possibly even a divine right of kings, plus all the trappings that come with them, all the dukes, lords, earls, counts, etc., and aristocracy. A landed aristocracy, in which titles and social status were inherited and passed on from generation to generation. Sounds like a great way to make a society absolutely stultified, doesn't it? Well, that was your conservative from Tocqueville's time. Today, the people who favor a landed aristocracy, they don't call it that anymore. And it certainly isn't hereditary, as people go into the same occupation as their parents, which often happens. But no, they set up a moral aristocracy, and they claim to themselves the higher morality. So if you have all the proper beliefs on the subject of wokeness and DEI and climate change and clean energy, you have to check all these LGBT, all these identity boxes. And if you do, then you're a virtuous person and you're on the inside. And you're vested with authority by the state. You teach in the schools, or you're a bureaucrat or some other functionary who helps enforce and perpetuate these orthodoxies. One of Mr. Core's observations does seem dated today. In contrast to the lack of reckoning according to socialism's history, he noted how in the wake of the Holocaust and the ruins of Nazism, anti-Semitism lay low a bit, embarrassed by its worst manifestation, its actual exercise of state dominion. Mr. Mamdani and others have shown that that is no longer true. So this is essentially a case of, who was it? Santayana, I believe, who said those who are ignorant of history are condemned to repeat it. This is a manifestation of that, very, very clearly. And in this particular case, the ignorance is willful. Phil's on the line. Let's find out what he has to say today. Always a pleasure to speak with him. So, Phil,
Hello, Charles.
Did you try going to YouTube and putting in Maha Aha, as I said?
No, I will get to that. Right now, I'm in the middle of exercising at the gym, and so I'm going to multitask.
There you go.
And speak to you for a couple of moments.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, what brings you here today?
Yeah, I want to go back to one of the topics that you brought out yesterday. I didn't have time to call. If someone gave me a 1-minute audience with Donald Trump, okay, here's what I would say to him. Mr. Trump, I am worried that your invoking of emergency powers, declaring emergencies all the time, is creating a dangerous precedent. And if the Republicans lose next time, this precedent could really be used against us and have dire consequences. Please stop using the emergency powers in an abusive way. What do you think of that?
I think it's fascinating. Sometimes the darndest coincidences occur. I have another listener who is unable to call because of his work situation. His name is Malcolm, And Malcolm is generally politically left, not extremely so, but certainly no supporter of Donald Trump. Malcolm writes, I would have you remind callers like Greg that all this authority that he so willingly gives to Trump under the auspices of emergency conditions will someday be used by a president with whom he does not agree. When that occurs, and it will, Greg will have no one to blame but himself. I remain unconvinced that executive powers are any way to run a constitutional republic. Now, I spoke a bit about this yesterday, and evidently it impressed you to the point where you called in. You are a Trump supporter. Here's Malcolm Park, who is not, and both of you are saying the same thing. You're saying this, emergency power declarations are no way to run a railroad.
Right. Yeah, I agree totally with that comment you just read by Malcolm. And I don't know why nobody on our side is speaking out against this. I guess it's loyalty to the president. But in order to defend their position and our keeping Congress in the midterms, I think it's time to speak out on that before further abuses occur.
I have a hunch that, in particular, with the place where Mr. Trump is most egregiously employing this is in his tariffs, which he wants to slap about willy-nilly. I am of the opinion that the courts will put an end to his tariff machinations. I just don't see it surviving a court challenge. This is not something that a president can unilaterally do. And the idea that, well, I'm, every day is another emergency and I'm just declaring all these emergencies, it doesn't pass muster with reasonable people. And I frankly think that this tool will be taken away from Mr. Trump.
Yes, I would look forward to that. And I would hope that whoever runs to replace him, let's say it's Ron DeSantis. If I were Ron DeSantis, I would campaign and say, we're going to continue the good work, but we're not going to abuse the declaration of emergency powers to just willy-nilly impose tariffs or anything that needs approval of Congress. We should go through Congress. And I think that would garner some people on the fence who are not sure. They're really upset with Trump, but they're not really left-wing, because I'm afraid we're going to lose those votes in the midterm. And I think this is the time that those whose offices are in jeopardy in the midterms, or anyone considering running for president next time, should express that view that hey, I like Trump's ideas, but I'm not going to abuse his executive power.
Phil, that makes perfectly good sense to me. On the other hand, I don't think that that's the way Mr. Trump sees it. And frankly, what I think will happen, the Supreme Court will eventually rule on this emergency tariff power. Mr. Trump will lose in the Supreme Court, probably by a considerable margin. And what will happen then is he will issue blistering attacks on the Supreme Court in general and even on its individual members, which will further erode the civic glue that holds our republic together.
And again, I would hope that some of our Republican leaders would agree with that. In other words, would agree with the court and say, hey, we need to uphold separation of powers, even though I like some of the things you're doing, Mr. Trump. The way you're doing them is really unconstitutional, and the courts have ruled that, and you need to find legal ways to do these things. And I would love to see a leader stand up and say that, and I would support that person 100%.
Well, you would, but when Republican members of Congress, etc., stand up and say things like that, they're excoriated and cast out. For example, I've got a piece here. Senator Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, who is about to leave office. He's passed his sell-by date and is now serving out the last 2 years of his term to prevent the Democratic governor there from nominating a Democrat to replace him. But there was a big confab of the Republicans in Kentucky. Their annual dinner, he was to achieve a Lifetime Achievement Award, and a bunch of MAGA people came along and kiboshed it. Now, if there is one Republican in Kentucky who deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award, it's Mitch McConnell. He was elected senator something like 35 years ago, at which time Kentucky was still an overwhelmingly Democratic state at every level. Today, it is thoroughly red, and he was the guy who, over a long time, steady work, fundraising, recruiting candidates, etc., Mitch turned Kentucky red. And today, we hate him, we hate him, we hate him. He isn't sufficiently subservient to and obsequious to Donald Trump. That's no way to be. I mean, during the Reagan years, there were Republicans who would oppose and criticize Reagan. Nobody thought that they should be cast out of the party or politically liquidated. I mean, we figured, okay, we'll keep their votes. We'll try to get some more. But this idea that either you walk in lockstep or you're unacceptable. This is no way to run a railroad. And if there's anything that's going to lose us the next midterm election, that's it.
Right. I would think somebody out there would have the courage to risk that ostracism from the Republican Party, and hopefully would have enough support from grassroots people like you and me that they would succeed and overcome that ostracism.
Yeah, that would be great. Some of the problem, of course, is that there are Republicans who have simply taken this to a degree that is unjustifiable. The poster child for that, of course, is Liz Cheney, who not only has been critical of the president, hell, I've been critical of the president, but no, she voted in the House of Representatives to impeach him and essentially went along with all of the hyperbolic Democratic claims about him. In other words, she fell victim to Trump derangement syndrome. What you need to find is somebody who can be critical of the president without being deranged about it.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't mean Liz Cheney. I
didn't hear you saying. I didn't hear you saying that.
Yeah. Because what Trump is doing is basically he's following a precept of the left, which is the end justifies the means. His ends may be worthwhile, but abusing the Constitution is not the way to get there.
Amen, brother. Oops. It's 10:01. We did it again.
Oh, we're over.
Oh, well. Hey, thank you for the call.
Okay, bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Oh, for heaven's sake, how foolish. How foolish. Oh, well, I got engrossed.
Wait. Fair elf maiden, I assure you, I have no quarrel with you. What is an elf maiden doing so far from home? Who are you, daughter of Valinor, of such beauty?
I am Gwenriel of Eregion. My pronouns are she, her. And who are you?
I am, Glabba.
And what of your pronouns?
What's a pronoun?
Never mind. My pronouns are she, her. I am standing on the stolen land of the indigenous orc peoples, and I am wearing a green cloak.
Yes, I can see that. I'm standing right here.
It's for the blind.
If they're blind, why do they need to know that you're wearing a green cloak?
Okay, here we go. Ableism and mansplaining? You Numenorians are so privileged, what with your patriarchal society.
If I may.
Excuse me, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. You have no idea what I have to go through on a daily basis. Men catcalling me, assuming that I can't fight because I'm a tiny woman half their size, and don't even get me started on the man spreading within the elvish community.
My lady, look out! Fairest maiden of the Elven realm, I swear that no harm will come to you as long as I live.
You killed they!
Well, yeah. He was an orc. They are the bad guys, you know.
You assume that they're the bad guys because of your internalized colonialist presumptions. They're actually an oppressed, marginalized group that has been driven out by ethnocentric, xenophobic Numenorians.
Another orc approaches. Should I kill it?
No! That's punching down. Just apologize. Tell him that you're listening and you're willing to learn about the orc community.
What does that even mean?
Tell him you see him, you hear him, you celebrate him.
Will that stop him from trying to kill me?
No, but it will help with your Numenorian guilt.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys!
He's heavily implying he's going to eat me!
Don't mock ethnic food choices.
He's not a racial minority! He's a hideous orc!
Really? Body shaming now?
Oh my God. Okay, so that's funny. So what do we got? What do we got? What do we got? I know, I did it again. Well, blame it on Phil. He calls up and he makes this very interesting point. He gets me engaged in a conversation, and I forget to look at the little digital clock down here in the corner of the screen, and all of a sudden it's 10:01, and oh dear. Well, I can offer you the same opportunity. You too can get me engaged in a conversation to the point that I forget who I am, what I'm doing, and where I am located. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. Take your best shot. The point that Phil made, it is interesting that he would make that point the same day that Malcolm had sent me an email on exactly the same topic. Hey, these emergency powers, this is a slippery slope. And what are you going to do? How upset are you going to be if Gavin Newsom or some other Democrat becomes president and starts saying, hey, I can do whatever I want to do. Emergency powers. And remember, Donald Trump didn't start this. He is merely pushing it a lot further down the road. Barack Obama, within the first year of his administration, his Environmental Protection Agency extended the powers in their hands tremendously, simply by reclassifying carbon dioxide, a naturally occurring atmospheric element. They reclassified it as a pollutant. That which is absolutely essential to the life of every green plant in the world is a pollutant, according to the Obama EPA. And of course, that by classifying that as a pollutant, all of a sudden that enables all kinds of emergency powers and extraordinary powers. So by executive fiat, we can say, oh, there shouldn't be any more electric cars. Oh, we shouldn't drill for any more oil or gas. Leave it in the ground. Destroy our economy. Send our power bills through the ceiling. Did the people ever vote for that? This is a constitutional republic run through representative democracy. In other words, the people are supposed to be the boss. First three words of the preamble of the Constitution of the United States of America. We the people. When did the people ever vote to make carbon dioxide a pollutant? When did the people ever vote to get rid of oil and natural gas? None of these things were ever debated at an election. How many Democratic candidates for Congress? How many did Joe Biden come before the American people and say, vote for me, and I will eliminate oil and gas and open the borders? If he had been an honest man, he would have said that. But of course he understood, and he was quite correct about this, that the American people would not vote for that. They didn't want that. So what do you have to do? You have to achieve office somehow. Stay in your basement. Wear a mask. Let Donald Trump lose enough votes so that you can get elected. Then once you get elected and you actually have the power in your hands, then you proceed to forgive student loans and do all kinds of other things that you don't have the constitutional right to do. And this is what Phil was so upset. He says, once we get one of our people in, we're supposed to take the Constitution seriously. If Donald Trump wants to impose tariffs, he's supposed to go to Congress and ask them to impose tariffs. Problem, of course, right now is that Democrats in Congress have made it clear that they will oppose any policy the president requests. That is so appalling. The idea that, well, we hate this president so much. I mean, Republicans, when Franklin Roosevelt was in the White House, called, that man in the White House. But did Republicans simply knee-jerk oppose everything FDR put on the table? Of course not. That was another time, another day, at which serious people behaved seriously. They actually looked at proposals and judged them on their merits, instead of simply saying, whose name is on it? Oh, it's another Democrat? That's great. Oh, it's a Republican? To hell with it. And there are Republicans who behave the same way. The policy is judged no longer by its merits or its value, but rather who put it forward? Whose idea is it? Dangerous stuff. That was an unfortunate habit. My old pal Juan Carlos used to do that from time to time. As long as a Democrat was proposing it, he thought it was a great idea. If a Republican came up with basically the same idea, all of a sudden it was NG. Never could understand that. But when you get really, really partisan, you wind up in that position. You know, Phil also talked about the next election. This is Thursday, and Karl Rove, in his weekly column, addresses the question of the next election. Let's see what he has to say. Once again, you might ask, well, why should we care what Karl Rove has to say? Karl Rove is a unique human being on the face of the earth. No other person, no other living human being has successfully managed 2 Republican campaigns for President of the United States. He ran 2, he won 2. Now, I don't know whether that's sufficient to achieve your respect or not, but it's sure as hell sufficient to grab mine. The midterm elections are 15 months away. Both Republicans and Democrats are showing strengths. Republicans are stockpiling cash, courtesy of President Trump. His Political Action Committee has raised nearly $200 million. They have that cash on hand. The Republican National Committee has about $80 million. The Democratic National Committee has about $15 million. GOP House members in battleground districts are outraising Democrats in swing seats by about 25%. The Senate map favors the Republicans. 20 of 22 Republican-held seats up next year are in red states, where the party should win if it doesn't nominate scandal-ridden candidates. 2 Democratic seats are in states Mr. Trump carried, 5 in states Kamala took by single digits. In other words, close states. There are more Democratic House members in seats Mr. Trump won, 13, than Republicans in seats that Ms. Harris carried, 3. So that gives us more targets to shoot at than they have. The GOP's chances will likely be improved by redistricting in Texas and Ohio. Republicans also benefit from ineffective Democratic leadership and messaging. There's time for those leaders to start acting smarter and improving their messaging, but the clock is running. If New York elects socialist Zohran Mamdani in November, he will be the Democratic Party's face going into 2026. The party would be better off with a more normal Democrat dominating this fall's election night coverage, but that's unlikely to happen. On the other hand, Democrats have advantages, starting with history. The president's party has lost House seats 18 of the past 20 midterms, going back to World War II. It lost Senate seats 15 of 20 times, yet Mr. Trump's approval, and the Real Clear Politics average, is a lackluster 46%. By 46% to 43%, more Americans call themselves Democrats than Republicans. That's right. In the generic, do you consider yourself a Democrat or a Republican? We're back to being behind. This erases the Republican Party's 2024 lead, its first in nearly 30 years. Democrats are more energized. 72% of their voters saying they're extremely motivated to vote, compared with 50% for Republicans. This has been a problem in past years. When 2022, for example, one of the reasons we had a rather weak showing, that was supposed to be a very strong year for the Republicans. But it wasn't, and a lot of this was because many Trump supporters, well, he's not on the ballot this year. So why should I go and vote for somebody else? I'm a Trump voter, and the idea of having to turn out an off-year election and support Republicans, well, I'm not that interested in it. And I think that's what these numbers are indicating. Democrats could also benefit from missteps by Republicans. Mr. Trump and his party need to drive home their successes relentlessly. Yes, yes. When leaders fail to do so, voters often register progress, then quickly move on and lose interest. It's especially true if it doesn't affect them personally, but dominated media coverage that declined once the issue was handled. That's the case with border security. Voters were deeply concerned about it in 2024, After Mr. Trump returned to the White House, he cracked down on the flood of immigrants across the southwest border. It ceased. But the president didn't travel to the region, didn't wrap himself in that success, didn't draw attention to it. When you hit a home run, by God, it's okay to remind everybody about that. When you make the catch and score the game-winning touchdown, it's okay to wave the ball over your head and do a little dance. In the case of a president of the United States, I was going to say dancing isn't really appropriate, but one of the things Mr. Trump is known for is dancing. But what would be called for, once again, is a presidential address to the nation, explaining, first of all, claiming the success. You know, you elected me to do this job. I've done it. Here's how it was done. And here's what it means to you, to your community. Mr. Trump did not do that with his border success. We talk about it all the time. People who are supporters of his, they remind people, hey, what about that? We had that terrible situation going with the border, and he just absolutely turned that around. And the anthem of the voter is, oh, what have you done for me lately? It helps. It really helps if in the course of events, when a success of this nature is scored, you underline it with heavy black marker. Now that problem is in the rearview mirror. Americans are paying attention to Mr. Trump's other immigration efforts. His administration began by arresting and expelling illegal aliens who had committed crimes after crossing the border. That was popular. But Team Trump now appears to be grabbing undocumented people indiscriminately, no matter how long they've been here, stayed out of trouble, and played a constructive role in our economy. This is increasingly unpopular, especially in the farm community and in the construction industry, which need the workers. Approval of the president's handling of immigration has fallen from 54% in March to 44% now. That is a 10-point drop. That is statistically significant, being far outside the margin of error. Republicans strongly support Mr. Trump's initiatives. Democrats strongly oppose them. The problem is with independents, who now oppose Mr. Trump's approach. Their voters could well decide the midterms. On economics, remember, it's always the economy. Team Trump is making the same mistake as the last administration. President Biden and big-name Democrats went across America proclaiming Bidenomics is working. Remember that? The president's policies are tremendously successful. People didn't agree. They didn't see it in their communities. They didn't feel it in their lives. It is dangerous to tell people that water is dry. The danger from Mr. Trump is he's addicted to superlatives and self-congratulations and prone to declaring premature success. Our economy is booming, he posted Tuesday. The White House website recently declared economic growth shatters expectations as President Trump fuels America's golden age. An aide claims it's all working beautifully, except it isn't. While Republicans generally agree with the president's depiction of things, independents don't. They're concerned about tariffs, debt, and prices. This leaves the president's approval on the economy at 43% in the Real Clear Politics average. On inflation, it's 39%. 53% believe the country's going in the wrong direction. Team Trump would be smarter to under-promise and over-deliver. That's not something that Mr. Rove just made up. Under-promise and over-deliver is a phrase that I can't remember the first time I heard it. And I'm sure by the first time I heard it, it was already hoary with age. But again, I would make the point to you. Old sayings don't get old. unless they're true. Under promise and over deliver is really good advice for a business enterprise, for a relationship, for a political battle. Under promise and over deliver. People will be impressed. Hey, you said you were going to get me a Volkswagen. All of a sudden, here's a Packard. Wow! That's how it works. Under promise, over deliver. Have you ever heard Donald Trump under promise? No, that is not something he is constitutionally capable of. And this is one of the things that is a perennial problem in his political life. And again, this is not something that is being done to him by anybody. I mean, I'll grant you, he's got plenty of critics, many of whom are extraordinarily unfair and inaccurate in the things they say about him. But Mr. Trump himself employs language and practices that work to his own disadvantage. That's a problem. Team Trump would be smart to under-promise and over-deliver, especially since righting the economy will take time. It's self-destructive for Republicans to make over-the-top claims. How voters feel about their own circumstances will hugely influence next year's outcome. Seeming out of touch could make the midterms harder. That's what happened to the Democrats during the Biden years. Bidenomics is great. People are looking around themselves at rising prices, at worsening conditions, at lost purchasing power. You're telling me this is great? You're full of it. Don't tell people things are great when they aren't. They become vexed and react poorly. 1024. Still looking for today's second phone call. 831-265-5050. 831-265-5050. We shall be back presently. Right now, here are this hour's messages.
Gonna be fun. Art, wine, beer, live music, cops and robbers' cars, great food, smiling people, and happy dogs. You know it's going to be fun as your friends and neighbors at SantaCruzVoice.com broadcast live and in person, start to finish, from the Scotts Valley Art and Wine Festival Saturday and Sunday. This 15-hour live marathon broadcast is brought to you in part by
Back Nine Grill and Bar, Eric's Deli Cafe, Knox Garden Box and Wood Shop, Roaring Camp Railroads, Scarborough Ace Hardware, Togo's Sandwiches.
Tune in and come to the Scotts Valley Art and Wine Festival this weekend. Oh yes, this live festival broadcast is going to be fun.
Attention content producers. You can have access to a complete digital media production facility at Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Easily rent video and audio equipment, a studio with green screen, editing suite, and audio booth, all at can't say no rates. Schedule a tour to see for yourself at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
It's time to enter your best in this year's Santa Fair. A hobby collection, favorite pie, cookie, art projects, flowers, fruits and vegetables, quilts, Legos, and more. Most entries close August 21st. Entry information is available online at SantaCruzCountyFair.com, and while you're there, take advantage of pre-sale ticket packages. That's SantaCruzCountyFair.com, and we'll see you at the Santa Cruz County Fair.
Okay, it is 10:27. We're just about, well, it's close enough to say that we're halfway through today's program. 831-265-5050 is the telephone number. We have had today's first call, but you can be the second. And when you call, remember you have extended to you the courtesy of choosing what you want to talk about, deciding the direction you'd like to send the program in, and et cetera, et cetera. One of the areas, we've been talking about how President Trump's tactics sometimes are self-destructive. Phil called to talk about his tendency to rely on emergency powers, which have the disadvantage, of course, of being ephemeral. But the real point here, of course, is that if all sorts of things can be done by a president by declaring, hey, it's an emergency. I remember, did this start with, it started with George W. Bush. I think this is the first time I remember this. So this goes back 20 years now. George W. Bush was nearing the end of his second term, and there were Democrats who were seriously claiming that George W. Bush would declare a national state of emergency and that he would then cancel the election and remain in office indefinitely. He would insulate himself in the White House. Well, of course, nothing like that ever happened. But predictably, 8 years later, instead of letting that sleeping dog lie, Republicans then picked the same argument up and claimed that Barack Obama, as his administration ended, would declare a state of emergency and seek to perpetuate himself in office. We are now learning that it seems that Mr. Obama, surrounded by some of the top people in his administration, did indeed seek to use the apparatus they controlled to handicap and, if possible, end the incoming administration of which they disapproved. The facts concerning that are now being examined, and to the extent that they prove to be accurate, people should be punished for that. That's a big deal. But now we look at Mr. Trump claiming emergency powers to impose tariffs left, right, and center. Now, earlier in today's program, and time after time, I have raised the alarm. If Mr. Trump can claim emergency powers and do all these things, then the next time a Democrat sits in the White House, and sooner or later one will, God save us, then that Democrat will say, oh, well, hey, I've got emergency powers to do this, 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 and this. It'll be a mess. So it's important for every president to not just act in the present, but to think about the future and what their actions will mean. Now, I've talked a bit about Mr. Trump's tariff regime. I've never been enthusiastic about it. Insofar as the economic effects, I am waiting. I will bide my time. Let's take the national temperature, say, at the first of the year. That's still 4 or 5 months off. The point was made just a few minutes ago. The United States economy does not change overnight. We understand that. We've got Michael on the line, and I'll be interested in hearing what's on his mind. So let's, there we go. Well, no, doesn't look like. Okay, well, there he is. I wonder why that happened. Let's try to bring him up again. Hello.
Michael.
Hi there. Oh, my God.
Hello.
Yeah, good. I got you this time.
Are we punching buttons?
Yeah, and
I know I've been punching a few here, so
yeah, and yelling at the screen. Okay, welcome. Thank you for the call.
There you go. Welcome. Yeah, thank you for taking my call, Charles. I do have a sea story for you. that you might be interested in because
Okay.
you and I once both sailed those seas.
For the
I'm
benefit
talking about South China Sea.
for the benefit of all our listeners, Michael, do you know the difference between a sea story and a fairy tale?
Well, of course, but this is a sea story.
Well,
It might be a fairy tale. I don't know.
Well, the difference between a sea story and a fairy tale. A fairy tale begins with the words "Once upon a time." A sea story begins with the words "This is no." Fill in the blank.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so now tell your sea story. I'm
Well,
interested.
this sea story starts out with this week. There was a magnificent shipwreck, a collision in the South China Sea between two Chinese warships pursuing one Philippine fishing boat. And it was a very, very interesting collision at sea because of what it might portend. So here's the story. It goes something like this. A Philippine support vessel for the fishing fleet was heading out to resupply the fishing fleet, and it was heading in one direction. Perhaps it was north-northeast. On its starboard flank was a Chinese destroyer, a full-sized Chinese destroyer, maybe about 50 yards away, really close.
Yes.
And coming up on the port flank from the rear was a Chinese Coast Guard ship, and it had all of its water cannons at full burst, and it was racing up on the Philippine support boat. And just as it was about to make its final charge at the fishing boat, the Chinese destroyer turned hard to port and smashed the whole bow of the Coast Guard ship completely off. And the boats wandered around a little bit. And finally, the Philippine boat called the Chinese Coast Guard and said, "Hey, we have medical people here. If you need help, we'd love to help you." How's that? And then shortly thereafter, the United States sent two destroyers of ours, one destroyer and one literal combat ship, into the area to see what the hell was going on. And they snooped around and they saw that there was some Chinese naval activity, but nothing much going on. They saw that the Chinese ship was still searching for survivors from the Chinese Coast Guard ship. But so they left. And then the Chinese public information officer for the Chinese Navy released a note that said the Chinese Navy has chased the United States Navy away from the Chinese territorial waters.
Uh-huh.
And these waters, of course,
I'd like to ask for
are Philippine waters.
I'd like to ask for one point of clarification. You mentioned that a search was being made for survivors from the Japanese Coast Guard vessel. Earlier, it had told us that the Coast Guard vessel had its bow sheared off by the destroyer. Question: Did the Coast Guard vessel?
That's correct.
Did the Coast Guard vessel then sink?
No, it did not sink, and it just went dead in the water. Lost its engine, went dead in the water.
But there were people. There were human beings. There were human beings in the water as a result of this collision.
Well, they were lost, evidently. In the video preceding the actual wreck, you could see maybe about 4 or 5 crewmen on the bow of a Coast Guard cutter.
Uh-huh.
Getting ready to do something to the Philippine fishing boat. I don't know what they were planning on doing, but obviously they were getting ready for something.
Well,
when the Chinese destroyer sheared hard to port
right,
and chopped off the bow of the Coast Guard, they all disappeared.
They all disappeared. You mean the Philippine fishing craft disappeared?
No, the Chinese Coast Guard. When the Coast Guard's bow was sheared off by the Chinese destroyer,
yes,
all of the seamen aboard the Chinese Coast Guard bow disappeared.
So the ship was sheared, and did both parts, the main part of the ship and the bow, did both remain afloat, or did the bow sink?
No, there was no bow left. Just the main part of the boat.
So the bow
was sheared off.
Sheared off and sank.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Leaving only the main part of the boat.
Gotcha.
Still afloat.
Understand. Okay, so
those sailors that were on the bow are gone.
So it's like the Stockholm after she hit the Andrea Doria. The bow is gone, and anybody who happened to be there is also gone.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Now,
gotcha.
What makes this really interesting, Charles, is why did the Chinese destroyer suddenly and with great volition plow into that Coast Guard? They had to make a hard turn to the port and smacked it dead center and knocked the bow off.
Okay, I'm wondering about that myself. Do you have light to shed on that?
I may. From scuttlebutt, I hear in the those who pay attention to China suggest that as we speak, there's a big conference going on in Baidahe, which is the summer resort for the CCP. And it is rumored that there's a lot of contention between Xi Jinping, the chairman, and Zhang Youxia, who is the general in charge of the People's Liberation Army, Navy, and so on.
Okay, I have seen I've seen some YouTube videos about this, so I'm at least a little bit familiar. This is very interesting. Please go on.
Okay. So it appears, at least to me, like General Zhang Youxia, has booted Xi Jinping out of the army, out of control of the military. What is it that Mao said in 1927? Political power comes from the barrel of a gun.
Right.
And so whoever runs the military really runs the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay.
Now, Xi Jinping did have that power to control the CCP until maybe last year he apparently suffered a stroke. And when he did, Zhang Youxia stepped in, completely took over the military, and ran off all of Xi Jinping's generals. So, the speculation is such that these two characters are at each other's throats for control of the military. And so going back to the shipwreck, what we have was a Coast Guard cutter that was intent on plowing into this Philippine fishing support vessel and causing major damage. It would just look like that was the intent.
Mm-hmm.
And this destroyer, seeing what was going to happen, turned hard to port and smashed into the destroyer, preventing it from doing what it wanted to do. That could well have been the two political factions duking it out in Beijing and whatnot.
On the high seas. So here's a question. Do you know the answer to this one? You might not. Let's take this as a real possibility. because otherwise, the idea that one Chinese vessel would interfere with another Chinese vessel, which was about to 86 a Philippine fishing vessel. I mean, the Chinese have been persecuting the Filipinos in those waters for years now. So that's nothing new. You'd expect that. But you wouldn't expect one of the Chinese ships to interdict the other, particularly in such a violent fashion. So the question is, was it the destroyer or the Coast Guard craft that favored Xi Jinping?
The Coast Guard, the speculation is that those on the Coast Guard cutter that were going to, lay into the Philippine ship, they were on Xi Jinping's side, because if they could precipitate an international incident in which that probably would start a war between the Philippines and China, that would benefit greatly Xi Jinping, who has nothing going now. Now,
well, how would that? I don't think that even if they had fired on and sunk that boat, that wouldn't have started a war. The Philippines is not about to go to war with China. That would not be a smart move. They would lodge a very strong.
No, but guess who by treaty would? The United States.
President Trump would not follow the Philippines into a war over one ship. He wouldn't do it.
Well, whether they would or would not, what's interesting is that it most certainly would have precipitated a major international incident.
Okay, so what you're saying here, I want to make sure I understand the procession of events. You're telling me that there's a Coast Guard vessel and a destroyer. The Coast Guard vessel is the one that is interested in precipitating this event. They're attacking this Philippine ship, and the destroyer acts forcefully to prevent them.
Yes, by turning into the Coast Guard cutter and chopping off its bow.
Right, very
severe
action there. So
very suddenly, very hard.
So
this was a deliberate act.
So I have to agree with that. I can't see any other possibility. So once again, if you extrapolate the idea of this internal power struggle, then you're saying that it was the Coast Guard cutter that was being controlled by acolytes of Xi Jinping, and the destroyer that was sympathetic to the who was the new fellow?
Zhang Youxian.
Okay.
Zhang Youxian.
Okay, thank you. And
now Zhang Youxian is not. Incidentally, Zhang Youxian has always been on Chairman Xi's side. As a matter of fact, when Xi got his extra third term in office, which is against all norms of the Chinese Communist Party,
right?
It was General Zhang Youxian who brought in the army and surrounded Beijing, letting everybody know that this is the way it was going to be, and that he's supporting Xi Jinping. But ever since then, he realized that he made a major boo-boo by supporting Xi Jinping, who went off on this incredible totalitarian fascism that we've seen in the last dozen years, half dozen years.
And cult of the personality.
Exactly. Now, I don't know if most people even know this, but the Chinese Communist Party own the People's Liberation Army. The PLA is not part of China at all. It's a function of the Chinese Communist Party.
One more question. Is the People's Liberation Army then, this was a sea exercise, this general is an army general, these are Navy people, or is the People's Liberation Army in charge of the Chinese seagoing forces?
Yes, it is in charge of the seagoing forces. It's called the People's Liberation Army Navy. That said, those in the Navy have been more friendly to Xi Jinping. As a matter of fact, Xi Jinping's general in charge of all the PLAN was an admiral in the Navy, and he just got booted out here recently by Zhang Yongxian. So you can see there's this tremendous internal fight within the CCP for the gun, for the barrel of the gun. And Xi Jinping had that, but he lost it to Zhang Yongxian. And so what took place in that sea wreck, where a Coast Guard cutter was intent on crashing into or sinking a Chinese fishing support vessel, and was prevented from doing so by a Chinese Navy destroyer, represents two factions of the power struggle going on in Beijing. And,
well, Michael,
and throughout the Chinese communist world.
You promised us an interesting sea story, and you have certainly delivered on your promise. You under-promised and over-delivered, as a few minutes ago. So I'm assuming that, well, there's a couple of things I'd like to point out about this. Number one, of course, is that anyone who is fascinated by this, and we all should be, I'm sure it will be discussed in greater detail later on today on the China Now program, which Michael will now speak about.
That is absolutely true. We'll talk about, I guess that's really how we're going to introduce the show, is the story of the shipwreck in the South China Sea. And the impact of that it might have in the struggle for control of the Chinese Communist Party. For the gun. Who's got the gun? The gun controls everything.
Well, so that's
the story.
Again, I'm listening carefully to this, and the first question that comes to my mind, I'm going to ask it of you now. I'm sure you'll discuss it later on your own program. But is there a hero here? It strikes me that earlier on, Deng Xiaoping came along and opened up the Chinese economy, and many of us thought, China will now do the same thing that South Korea, Taiwan, and Chile did. They will cease being authoritarian, and their people will eventually arrive at a point in terms of their standard of living, etc., where they demand political power. There will be a peaceful revolution. This will occur, la-di-di, la-di-da. But instead, this same Deng Xiaoping, who was willing to encourage China to become a wealthy country by employing capitalism, was unwilling to surrender any political authority, and when they tried to take it, he marched the People's Liberation Army from the countryside into Tiananmen Square and had them burned down where they stood. So my question now is, we understand Xi Jinping is a supreme autocrat, a cult of the personality, essentially the most Maoist thing since Mao. My question is this new guy, Dang, you say his name is he any better, or is he just Tweedledum and Tweedledummer? Chong. Thank you.
Well, Chong, Z-H-A-N-G, Zhang, Yo, Y-O-U, Xia, X-I-A, Zhang Yo Xia. Chong is a very interesting character because I think, I might be wrong, of course, I think what he would really like to do is disassociate the Chinese army from the CCP. And I guess the expression is nationalize the army. So instead of the army being a property of the CCP, and that's where the problem lies.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute power corrupts, and power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Okay.
The Chinese Communist Party has absolute power, and they are absolutely corrupt, no matter how nice they are. And I think, I might be wrong, of course, I think Zhang Youxia realizes that the only real hope for China is to disassociate the military from the Chinese Communist Party. That, if there was a hero, if there is a hero anywhere there, that would be the person that I would look to.
So yeah, this would be the equivalent of him wearing the white hat, as opposed to Xi Jinping wearing the black hat.
Yes.
Well, this ongoing story.
In taking. Yeah, I was going to say that in taking control of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army and Navy, General Chang Youxia put himself totally at risk. Because if Xi Jinping stages a comeback, General Chang Youxia is dead.
Right.
As are a whole bunch of generals that followed him. So this is going to be, the next 2 months are going to be very, very interesting. And it's a fight to the finish, as I see it, between Xi Jinping, who is, as you said, accurately, is the acolyte of Chairman Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong. And if he wins, there will be an incredible reign of terror throughout China, or what has transpired to him over the last year and a half. So it's going to be really, really, and that's what is so frightening about what almost happened in the South China Sea between this Chinese Coast Guard cutter and this Philippine fisheries support vessel. Had the Chinese succeeded in doing whatever they were intent on doing, and if somebody had been killed in the process on the Philippine boat, the implications would have been huge, because that would have forced Marcos's hands in the Philippines. I got to do something. What am I going to do? So he goes out and does something, and China doubles down. And who is the guarantor of the Philippines? Us, you and I.
Well, the Philippines the Philippine government would write a nasty letter to the Times, and that's about all they could do. But I'm far more intrigued by the story you've told, and this is something, as I say, I've been familiar that there was a power struggle going on at the top level of the Chinese Communist Party. You are far better informed about it than I have been, and so this phone call is tremendously valuable, not just for my listeners, but for me as well. This is another example of every time I do this program, I learn something. So of these two people.
Well, the most important thing to learn from any conversation about what's going on in China is that it's all speculation, Charles.
Understood.
Because nobody, nobody has.
Well, your crystal ball is cloudy at best, but the fact that there is this struggle occurring is something that I think we can say with pretty much certitude, wouldn't you?
Yes, it is happening. There is a major struggle going on. But my co-host, Nan Su, on China Now, always likes to point out that it doesn't matter if you get rid of Xi Jinping, because another one will come along again, because it's the problem. It's not the people. It's not Xi Jinping. The problem is the Chinese Communist Party. And as long as the Chinese Communist Party is running the show, it's going to be like this. Maybe you'll get a nice commie who will, I don't know, do something nice in the world, or say nice things to people. But you're probably going to, sooner or later, end up with another Xi Jinping or another Mao, who is a big bully and is going to push his weight around and he's going to kick sand in everybody's face, and until he gets his way. So, yeah, to me, if somebody could figure out a way of freeing the power of the gun barrel from the CCP, I'm sure the CCP would wither and die really quickly, because not many people like the CCP in China.
I can see that.
It may have...
but, we've only got here a couple of minutes remaining, and I'd like to see if we can get something just a bit more definitive. Now, we do have this power struggle going on. A few moments ago, you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that within a space of about 2 months, we should know the outcome of this?
Yes, that's correct. There's two big events coming up. One is the military parade on September 3rd.
Uh-huh.
And the big question is, who will review the troops?
Right, just like the old Soviet days.
If we see Xi Jinping reviewing the troops in his open-air convertible,
yes,
then we'll know that he is still nominally, at least, in charge.
What if we see Xi Jinping and a bunch of uniformed guys suddenly come out and grab him and hustle him away?
There you go.
We saw that not that long ago.
Yeah, that's right. That was Hu Jintao that got tossed out. So if we see Xi Jinping standing on a review stand next to Vladimir Putin, that's another thing. That's not the king of the roost position there. The king of the roost position will be in the convertible, driving along and reviewing the troops. So I heard today that someone said that the CCP has
20 seconds
to allow Xi Jinping to do that. Okay, and then of course the fourth plenum is scheduled for October, and that's when the bleep will hit the fan, one way or another.
Well, I'm counting on you to.
Xi Jinping will win.
Counting on you to continue doing China Now, and also calling this program occasionally and bringing us up to date. Thank you very much, Michael. The time now is 11 o'clock. Well, that was fascinating. Thank you very kindly. Okay. Very good, very good.
Gear today is getting out of control.
Student loan debt, a national crisis.
I'm in debt $70,000.
Student loan debt keeps growing. The last administration blamed greedy bankers taking big profits.
Unnecessary middlemen in administering student loans.
So government would take over student loans.
We take the middleman out. We take the banker out of the picture because they're taking a profit.
We'll save American taxpayers $68 billion.
But instead, the cost to taxpayers went up and student debt increased.
13 years ago, the average new college graduate owed $20,000 in student loans. Today, that number has jumped to $37,000.
What are you guys doing to help us with the student loan debt?
Some politicians are still so eager to blame banks, they don't even know that they kicked banks out of the loan business.
Who would like to answer first?
We stopped making student loans in 2007 or so.
Mr. Diamond?
When the government took over student lending in 2010 or so, we stopped doing all student lending.
If actual private lenders, people with skin in the game, made college loans, they'd care about being paid back. They'd tell students which majors often lead to higher paying careers and warn them that majoring in, say, sociology, art history, or gender studies might make it tougher to get out of debt.
If I'm a young person going to college, the federal government doesn't tell me that the amount that I'm borrowing is probably going to be unaffordable for me because I'm on a path towards a low earnings occupation.
Beth Akers of the Manhattan Institute is the author of Game of Loans. Under the government program, no student has a reason even to think about, will I earn money?
That's right. We charge everyone the same interest rate, and we give them the same caps on how much they can borrow.
Currently, many students are really dumb about their loans. 28% don't even know they have a loan.
It's not because they're dumb, it's because we've made a system that's really complex.
Enough is enough! Pay us back!
Today, activists say, just make college free. Forgive all the loans.
It ends up giving very large benefits to people who probably don't need it.
So it would be welfare for the rich.
It sure would.
A better solution, says Akers, is something called an ISA, an income share agreement.
So you want to be a web developer? Sign up. Pay nothing up front. That's right, nothing.
Some private computer education boot camps do that.
That gets them into a career, most often in coding.
So those people were getting jobs.
Yeah, the ISA was a way for the school to say to them, you're only going to pay us if we help you succeed.
Now, some colleges offer ISAs. Graduates who get jobs repay the loans by paying the college a percentage of their income.
In the past 5 years, people are starting to get excited and try to implement income share agreements.
At first, I had no idea how I was going to move forward and pay for my education.
Engineering student Paul Aurora was thrilled to learn that Purdue would help him get an ISA loan. So was Andrew Hoyler, who's just started working as a pilot. Now that he has a job, he must pay the university 8% of his income for 104 months.
So after that 104-month term ends, if you still have money that you owe, it's forgiven. It's forgotten, you don't owe another penny. Now, if I find myself in a six-figure job tomorrow, there's a chance that I'll pay back far more than I initially took out.
But you're okay with that?
I'm okay with that. The security of knowing that I'll never pay back more than I can afford every month was enough for me.
If it's so good for you, I think it would be bad for the investor.
It's a risk that they take, just like an investment.
It conveys information to the student about how lucrative a different major is going to be.
English majors must pay 4.5% of their income for 116 months. Math majors pay 4% for just 96 months.
Some people think that's unfair, but really that's just a way that they can recapture the amount of money that they've put up in the first place.
This is new, useful information about what professions pay.
Not only what they pay, but how stable it may be, what the future is like. And it may even sway students away from going into majors that don't have job prospects post-graduation.
The English major has to pay 116 months. Your loan is over 30 months sooner.
It's definitely something to look forward to, that I can stop paying people quicker.
We should think about investing in students the same way that we invest in startups. Share equity in their company.
Basically put the students in touch with rich people.
It may be that there are rich investors feeding money into that fund, but it's not an individual connection between students and investors.
We don't know who the investor is, but I'd love to, give them a hug or buy them a beer or something.
Institutions are saying, hey, if I'm operating as the middleman, in a sense, I can make sure that no one's taking advantage of my students.
Still, some call ISAs predatory. This is like indentured servitude. You're locked into paying for all these months.
And if you're graduating, you don't have a job, you're not paying anything, so.
Okay, let us return to the day's efforts. 2, 3, 4. Hour number 3 begins. The time is 11:06. News talk from 9 to noon every weekday here on Santa Cruz Voice with yours truly, Charles Freedman. Well, we've been fortunate in the first 2 hours. Each hour has brought us a fortuitous telephone call from an interested listener. So glad to hear from Phil during hour number 1 with his very germane question about what Mr. Trump intends to do when this emergency powers thing gets pushed to its ultimate extent by some Democrat. And, of course, Michael calling and informing us, giving us the latest on a power struggle now underway in the Chinese Communist Party. This is something I'm really glad he called. This is something that I've been thinking about talking about on the program, but I didn't have enough information to make it intriguing. Michael supplemented all that, came up with additional information, promised us a great sea story, gave us one, and linked it to what is now happening, as he said, behind the scenes here. You know, the question, well, who's going to win? You tell me and we'll both know. But one thing Michael did do was give us a timeline. He said the military parade is in September, the party plenum is in October, and these will be the public indications by looking at the proper tea leaves. And Michael will call back and tell us how to read those. He already gave us a little bit of a clue, but he'll call back and tell us how to read those later on. In the meantime, for more on that, every Thursday from 3 to 5, China Now, here on Santa Cruz Voice. And Michael and Nansu will take you through some of the more arcane ins and outs of Chinese politics. And if you think American politics is labyrinthine, check theirs out sometime. Okay, the time is 11:08. The telephone number is 831-265-5050. 831-265-5050. Before Michael's valuable phone call, I had started to talk a little about Mr. Trump and his tariff regimen, which I have never been enthusiastic about. I was mentioning that I'm willing, in terms of the economics of it, I'm willing to see what shakes out. And we don't know about that yet. But we've already had a discussion today from both pro and Trump observers saying that the authority the president is using to impose these tariffs is legally and constitutionally questionable. I go along with that. So why is he doing this? Well, Robert Zoellick, who has served as U.S. Trade Representative and Deputy Secretary of State, so he has been there and done that, and he comes up with a reason why. Anyone trying to make sense of President tariffs is missing the point. The conga line of trade negotiators will keep dancing because Mr. Trump will continue to use tariffs to exert dominance, signal threats, and make deals. There won't be a new end state. Tariff numbers will keep fluctuating. Prices for goods and investments will be unreliable, and agreements won't last. But the damage to America's economy and strategic interests will persist. This is something that this paragraph really is a great introductory paragraph. It essentially says it all. One of the things that I and others have complained about is the uncertainty, the idea that from one week to the next, tariff levels change, trade arrangements change. How can a planner, a business owner, an executive running a company and attempting to serve customers? That's how companies survive. You serve customers. You get goods and services into people's hands. In the case of tariffs, we're dealing now with goods, physical goods that are made somewhere, they're imported here and in your local stores at a reasonable price for the benefit of you, the consumer. So the company, the business serves you. That's how they exist. But how can they do that if from day to day, week to week, the ground shifts under their feet? Suddenly, there's an additional tax levied on maybe part of what they use to build their products. Say you're building automobiles. Some of what you use to build the automobiles comes from within the United States. Some of it has to be imported. That which is imported is now tariffed at 15%, 30%, 50%. You have to add that cost into your calculations. How much are you going to, what's the sticker price for that car going to be? How much can you afford to sell it and still make a profit and still have your company survive? From one day, 1 week to the next, you don't know. Now here is Mr. Zolik saying, yeah, get used to that. Because the idea that Mr. Trump will come in and, impose his Desolation Day tariffs and then immediately begin changing them, he won't stop. He's going to keep changing them, making it up as he goes along. And this is going to make the lives of people attempting to run businesses and serve customers, it's going to make their lives very, very difficult, if not impossible. The president has cited various goals for his disorderly deal-making. He wants to cut bilateral trade deficits, open foreign markets, protect favored U.S. industries, and restore manufacturing. He also wants to raise revenue, and in some instances simply punish others for a perceived offense. His administration leaps from one rationalization to another to justify the boss's most recent whim, but Mr. Trump won't be pinned down. He believes uncertainty adds to his power, and he wants the freedom to bully others while depending on what has his attention at any given moment. Consider the president's dismissive treatment of the most important trade pact from his first term. This was Mr. Trump's own accomplishment. This would be the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, which he negotiated, and which he rightfully was applauded for, certainly on this program. This renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement. Canada and Mexico, our closest investment partners, can't rely on Mr. Trump's own deal. As a former reality TV star, the president enjoys signing papers and waving them before cameras. He likes announcing concessions and deals. He revels in the appearance of winning and moving on to the next episode. The rest of his government scrambles to discover the terms of the deals, sorting through the exceptions and the side bargains before the merry-go-round spins again. Enforcement will depend on Mr. Trump's attention span and his latest fancy. During America's first 140 years, Congress wrote bills that set tariffs on individual items. The legislation was the big business of politics, defining parties and their campaigns. The high point of this system, or the low point, depending on your perspective, was the Tariff Act of 1930, or the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, which raised the average U.S. tariff to 59%, making the Great Depression far worse. 4 years later, President Franklin Roosevelt persuaded Congress to pass the Reciprocal Tariff Agreements Act, which delegated authority to the executive to negotiate lower tariffs. Under that act, presidents were supposed to account for the larger national interest in opening markets, superseding Congress' penchant to protect local producers. Roosevelt and his next 12 successors used extensions and adaptations of this authority to lower barriers and establish rules to boost the U.S. and global economies. Then, Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden arrived, embracing protectionism and breaking with 80 years of open trade. Mr. Trump's overreach of delegated congressional authority has led to a dramatic turn for America and the world. After World War II, the U.S. viewed economic and security policies as complementary. This was a great idea of Eisenhower's. His view was that the condition of the American economy was our first line of defense. Our economic prosperity and health was a national security issue, the biggest single one. When American policies and allies succeeded, they added markets for U.S. producers, lowered costs for consumers and companies, expanded growth, and enhanced American security. During those years, presidents took advantage of the attractive power of the country's flourishing economy and society while keeping America on a competitive edge. By contrast, President Trump relies on coercive power. He views economics as a zero-sum contest for a fixed pie of resources and wealth to be divided up through his deals. Ironically, the interdependence of American allies enables Trump to menace them more than possible foes. He is pummeling friends that Washington will need for military intelligence and technological cooperation. In contrast, he has been cautious with China, which made a plan to hit back effectively, especially through controlling exports of vital materials. President Trump's trade policies and uncertainty will impose costs over time. Prices will increase. Washington will misallocate resources to less competitive sectors. Productivity will slide. Other countries will be less willing to rely on American policies and companies. The costs might be offset for a time by other aspects of the U.S. economy, such as investments in artificial intelligence, data centers, and energy. But America will be dissipating economic power, resilience, and competitiveness. Brexit offers a rough analogy. The UK's withdrawal from the EU didn't plunge the British economy into a nosedive, but over the years, costs related to the shift have ground down the economy. Americans will rediscover that the rest of the world keeps turning, even if Washington tries to apply the brakes. New patterns of trade and investment will bypass Mr. Trump's jumble of protectionism. China and others will seek to set the standards and build the networks of the future. Mr. Trump's tariffs and chaotic trade policy will yield a mishmash, not an international system led by a more powerful and attractive America. This is essentially economic orthodoxy. It's what I fear. It disadvantages the United States in the long run. And as I don't know, maybe this is one of the reasons for Mr. Trump's success. During that momentary pause there, a number of thoughts were going through my mind having to do with delayed or immediate gratification. Do you want it now, or do you want more later? I confess, my mother used to tell me stories all the time about when she was a little girl, and it seemed like she had this photographic memory for everything that had happened as she was growing up. I always used to envy her that, because I don't have that many specific memories of my childhood, but I do have a few. And one of them I remember was in Modesto, in Sears Roebuck, with my dad. And at that time, I was, about 7 years old, maybe 8, something like that. In other words, a small boy. And like other small boys, I had some tools that I used to play with. I had some screwdrivers and a pair of pliers and a crescent wrench and a hammer and some other things. And I had seen my father had toolboxes. And I wanted a toolbox. And we were in the tool section of Safeway. Sears Roebuck. We're in, Craftsman like that. And there were some toolboxes for sale there. So my father said, Charles, here's what I'll do. Here's a toolbox that you can have today. Or if you'll wait till your birthday, this was like summertime. So my birthday was 6 months off. When you are 8 years old, 7 years old, 6 months is forever. You remember? Sure you do. Nowadays, 6 months goes by like that. But when you're a kid, till your birthday, criminellis, that'll never come. So my dad said, you can either have this toolbox today, right now, or if you wait till your birthday, you can have that one there. And he pointed out a far better toolbox. And he said, you go ahead and think about that. And presently, I came back to my dad and said, I think I'd rather wait and get the better toolbox later on. And my father was absolutely elated that I had taken that choice. As a matter of fact, you know how happy he was? He was so happy with me that he actually got me that nicer toolbox right away. He didn't make me wait for it. But he did demand that I make the choice. And when I chose delayed gratification, I chose, no, I don't want that one now. I want something better, even if I have to wait for it. That's one of those childhood lessons that I have never... I'm 73 now. That happened, 66 years ago, something like that. I remember that as clearly as yesterday. I can remember what the two toolboxes looked like. And I can remember my father smiling at me and saying, you know what we're going to do? But in contemporary life, and particularly in this 21st century we're in, delayed gratification seems to be more and more something that people think is for saps. They want it now, and they really aren't concerned. And they get encouraged in this. People take out exorbitant loans for college educations that they either do not complete or else which are not really marketable. And then when they're called upon to repay those loans, they get all upset. No, you can't ask me to do that. What's the old phrase, If you dance, you got to pay the piper. Well, these people aren't interested in paying the piper. They want to dance. But the musician has to perform for free. Rational people don't work for free. So when you or whoever expects other people to work for free, well, how bright is that? And when they expect things to happen that they can enjoy in the here and now, and the bill comes due later on, and they simply want to tear it up or set fire to it. That doesn't work. It can't be allowed to work. When did this really take off? One of the major impetus to this, back in 2007, 2006, 2005, right around there, a little less than 20 years ago, we had government policies that were essentially facilitating the writing of home mortgages for anybody. Government policy said if you refuse to write a mortgage for Joe Smith here, well, we're going to look into is this because Joe Smith is of a certain race or lives in a certain place? Have you redlined his home? And essentially, the idea being now, if somebody comes in and applies for a mortgage, you write it. And government agencies, quasi-government agencies, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they're going along with all of this. And the mortgage brokers are saying, well, every time we write a mortgage, we get paid. So there's no impetus on them to impose any kind of order. They're making a great living writing all these mortgages. I had a cat at that time who was a mortgage broker, and he was an advertiser on my program. And he told us, me and my audience, he told us, for the first time in my life doing this job, I have seen people get mortgages, and never make a single payment. Not even one. And I remember asking, what is the idea in this? Obviously, if you don't make any payments, you don't keep the house, do you? He says, hell no. We get what he called jingle mail. People put the keys in an envelope and send them back. But nevertheless, that mortgage now exists. It's been funded with real money. And that now constitutes a liability. And you get enough of those dead mortgages in your economy, and what happens? Well, look back at 2008 and 2009 and you'll see. once you create those dead mortgages, it's like, did you ever play, is it Hearts? I think that's the card game. And the Queen of Spades is the bad card. You don't want to get stuck with the Queen of Spades. So that's, the problem. And if you get stuck with it, you've lost the game or a tremendous number of points against you. Well, these bad mortgages are kind of like the Queen of Spades. Nobody wants to get stuck with them. So they bundle them with other good mortgages into investment instruments, and they market them to other people. Well, quick, get rid of it, get rid of it. Now it's somebody else's problem, not mine. And of course, presently, this investment that somebody has made turns out not to be profitable, because the profits from all of the good mortgages add up to, you're making what, 3%, 4%? But on the mortgages that aren't good, you're losing 100%. So you can wipe out your profit real quick at that rate. And suddenly these investment vehicles are showing a negative return. Uh-oh, you got stuck with the Queen of Spades, didn't you? The problem was that we created the Queen of Spades. And how do we do that? Something for nothing. Live today, forget tomorrow. Take the cheap toolbox. And the federal government facilitated this irrationality. And we wound up getting badly burned by it. That delivered an economic shock that we have never really completely recovered from. Do you remember that for the entire period of Barack Obama's presidency, and for most of Mr. Trump's, interest rates were zero? You ever hear of such a thing? How do you have a zero interest rate? Free money? Why was this done? No, because the Fed chairman and the Fed governors at the time realized that if they began to increase interest rates, say to 1% or 1.5% or some other piddly little number, the economy would be thrown into a tailspin. To prop up the economy during the teens, it took a 0% interest rate. Wow. Yeah, that's a real solid performer there. No wonder most people felt 6 years into Barack Obama's administration, hey, we're in a recession. We weren't. But it felt like it. It's what Mr. Trump better beware of now with his tariffs and everything. Right now, the economy is not in a recession. But it is not robustly growing either. It is stagnating. If it continues to stagnate between now and, say, a year from November, look for some very unpleasant numbers on election night. The time is half past 11 o'clock. It's time for us to bring you some messages. I will be back in 2 minutes. When I get back, I would love very much to be discussing matters with you. 831-265-5050 is the number. Let's talk.
The Scotts Valley Chamber of Commerce presents the 25th annual Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival, August 16th and 17th at Sky Park in Scotts Valley. 2 days of fun for the whole family with food, fine art, a kids fun zone, and live music, including the Joint Chiefs and the Lost Boys featuring James Durbin. Join us Saturday for the Cops and Rodders Car Show with over 100 vintage cars on display. And don't miss Dog Day Sunday with contests for all canines. All this and free admission to the Scotts Valley Art, Wine, and Beer Festival. See you there.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
It's hot up here. Hi, folks. Warren Knox here of Knox Roofing. Yes, it really does get hot up here, but it's okay because Knox team has been sweating it out on rooftops for 30 summers to make certain your roof will keep you warm and dry through the winter. If you have any doubt about your roof will weather the winter, call Knox Roofing today and ask about a free rooftop inspection. We love it up here. 461-0634. Thanks, folks.
The Santa Cruz County Fair starts Wednesday, September 10th, but now's the time to enter your best canning, baking, quilts, Legos, art, photography, flowers, fruits and vegetables, or favorite collections. Most entries close August 21st. Entry information is available at santacruzcountyfair.com. And while you're there, check for pre-sale ticket offers. Get your ticket packages, enter the fair, and we'll see you at
The Santa Cruz County Fair.
11:33, and our final segment is now beginning. Once again, love to have you join us at 831-265-5050. George W. Bush served 8 years as President of the United States, is generally regarded as an unsuccessful president. He overthrew Saddam Hussein in Iraq, but then completely botched the post-war history of that part of the world, seemed to have absolutely no clue. We look back on Mr. Bush and think, what was he thinking of? So I like now and again, how counterintuitive I can be. There was a particular item, one thing that Mr. Bush did that was very valuable, a very good idea, and that has shown good results since. He oriented American policy very much towards the nation of India. Now, Mr. Bush saw that China at that time was becoming more and more of an economic rival and conceptually a geopolitical rival. The only other country in the world with China's human resources is India. And India likely had the capacity to become a manufacturing center, a low-cost manufacturing center. China had pretty much taken over that role, so George W. figured, well, perhaps India can serve as a counterpoint. And India, after all, it really is a democracy, whereas China is a police state. So Mr. Bush chose to bring India and America closer together. Now that may be in danger. The U.S.-India relationship is in trouble due to President Trump's punishing tariffs and political public wooing of India's arch-enemy Pakistan. Even so, it's too early to write an obituary for one of America's most significant partnerships in Asia. If both sides can muster creativity and flexibility, they can prevent a rupture. First, the bad news. For the first time in more than a quarter century, since George W. Bush, the U.S. appears to be questioning a cornerstone of Indo-Pacific policy. Maintaining a strong relationship with India is in America's interest. This month, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on Indian goods and added another 25% because India is purchasing discounted Russian oil following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The combined 50% tariff is among the highest imposed on any country. On social media, Mr. Trump has castigated India for erecting strenuous and obnoxious trade barriers and not caring how many people in Ukraine are being killed and for having a dead economy. One thing about Mr. Trump, if you're on his excrement list, he'll find plenty of ways to denigrate you. Mr. Trump has also repeatedly said he brokered a ceasefire in a 4-day conflict between India and Pakistan in May. India says no. He has hosted Pakistan's de facto military ruler, Field Marshal Asim Munir, at the White House, applied a comparatively modest tariff rate of 19% on Pakistan, and talked up the prospect of helping develop Pakistan's oil reserves. An odd idea considering there's little evidence that Pakistan has much oil. As I was reading, I was thinking, what oil? Pakistan is not an oil country. The Pakistani government has nominated Mr. Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Oh my God. The pursuit of the uneatable by the unspeakable. India's official response has been muted. Foreign Ministry statement justified India's purchase of Russian oil, saying imports are meant to ensure predictable and affordable energy costs for Indian consumers. It pointed out that neither the European Union nor the U.S. has ended trade with Russia, and described America's targeting of India as unjustified and unreasonable. Pundits who follow the U.S.-India relationship agree that it's in deep trouble. Even Evan Feigenbaum of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace mentioned that President Trump is now in the process of dismantling this painstakingly built relationship, undoing decades of bipartisan effort. Donald Trump was supposed to be good for India in his second term. Shyam Saran, a former Indian foreign secretary, wrote, "He has turned out to be a nightmare." These concerns aren't overblown. The base 25% tariff took effect last week. The additional 25% is due to kick in August 27th. That would be within a little bit less than 2 weeks. The U.S. economy accounts for about 20% of India's exports. Labor-intensive sectors like textiles, garments, jewelry, and auto parts would be particularly hard hit by a 50% tariff. It also threatens the visibility of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's flagship Make in India program, which is aimed at boosting the country's manufacturing output. A strained relationship also hurts Washington. India was the 10th largest U.S. trading partner in goods and 8th largest in services in 2024. The greater potential downside of a weakened U.S.-India relationship is geopolitical. India boasts the largest population of any country. It is on track to become the world's third largest economy at market exchange rates by 2028. A recent report by the Center for a New American Security, a Washington think tank, listed India among 6 so-called global swing states, allied neither to the U.S. nor to China, that neither will exert disproportionate influence over the future of the international order. The geopolitical logic that brought the U.S. and India closer in the first place means a patch-up remains possible. Rupture would imply that under Trump the U.S. is no longer interested in taking seriously its competition with China. For India, the choice is a no-brainer. China claims large chunks of Indian territory, and is Pakistan's closest military and diplomatic ally. Both the U.S. and India have left the door open to compromise. Despite his harsh words, Mr. Trump has continued to call India a friend and has refrained from lashing out at Prime Minister Modi, nor has the Indian Prime Minister attacked the U.S. or Mr. Trump. Unlike most countries, India has the means to offer Trump a deal that he can sell as a big win. India is the world's second largest arms importer, after Ukraine, and the third largest oil importer, after the U.S. and China. Growing domestic demand for energy gives India room to increase its liquefied natural gas imports from the U.S. According to the Confederation of Indian Industry, Indian businesses have invested $40 billion in the United States. They could invest more. Even on agriculture, a major sticking point in negotiations, India could probably eliminate tariffs on select items such as soybeans and blueberries without risking too much political backlash. As long as the U.S. doesn't actively arm Pakistan, India could probably live with Mr. Trump's empty praise for Islamabad. India's ties with Moscow and outreach to Kiev could prove helpful in U.S. efforts to broker a peace deal. If India brings a sweeter offer to the table, Mr. Trump could give Mr. Modi a political win by dropping tariffs to 15% that Japan and South Korea enjoy. If this happens, people view the president as a builder of deeper U.S.-India ties rather than the wielder of a wrecking ball. But of course, if Mr. Trump were to do that, then 6 months later he might raise the tariff back to 50%. You just don't know where you stand with this fellow from one day to the next. And that is one of the biggest problems we face. It's 11:42. Once again, the telephone number here is 831-265-5050, 831-265-5050. I think, let me see, what we got, 18, 17 minutes left, something like that. There is a meeting going on tomorrow between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin. And some people are nervous about it. Frankly, I would have been nervous about it a few months ago, but now I don't think I am as much anymore. As I mentioned, Mr. Trump is a person who acts on his feelings du jour. And over the past few months, he has been lied to so consistently and disrespected so greatly by Vladimir Putin that I think as he goes into this negotiation, his inclination to give Putin some wonderful, wonderful deal, I don't think it's going to exist. If I were Vladimir Zelensky, what would I say to Donald Trump? I would say, Mr. President, you and I have had our disagreements. From time to time, each of us has said things that were unpleasant to the other. When you have spoken thus to me, I have heard you and I have listened. For my part, I haven't lied to you. I haven't tried to string you along. I have not dissembled. At that point, it would be unnecessary for Mr. Putin to say, or rather for Mr. Zelensky to say, and what about my Russian counterpart? Mr. Trump himself has told us, well, I've had wonderful conversations with President Putin, and he tells me he wants peace, and he tells me things are going to be wonderful and fine, and then the next day he's bombing orphanages and schools and hospitals. He's specifically and purposely targeting innocent civilians. Mr. Trump sees this. He knows it. Even this week, leading up to this summit, leading up to this meeting, once again, Russia's turning the screws. They're increasing their battlefield activity. Why are they doing that? Well, one of the reasons, or one of the effects is, it's a thumb in Donald Trump's eye. We're going to do what we feel like doing, and we don't give a flying damn what you think. This is the way Mr. Putin is treating Donald Trump. This is what he's saying to him. Up yours, Jack. Now, it is for this reason more than any other that I'm not really nervous about the outcome of this meeting. Mr. Trump has even said, well, this is just, going to be a brief session. We'll then later on have other negotiations in which we'll hopefully get this ironed out. Mr. Trump appears to be slowly but surely coming round to the idea that, well, he misled himself. Donald Trump misled himself. He was fairly confident, I think, that when he returned to office, he would be able to quickly and easily bring peace to Russia and Ukraine. All he had to do was butter Putin up a bit, make some nasty comments about Zelensky and Ukraine, and then, well, let's all knock off this nonsense and quit the fighting. But it didn't happen that way, did it? And it won't. Mr. Trump is now aware that that was never going to happen. I don't know if he ever has thought to himself, I figured that one wrong. I don't know if Mr. Trump is the type of person who ever is self-critical. Essentially, I think he must be. He's a very successful person, and people who are not self-critical don't tend to be successful because they don't learn from their mistakes and they keep making the same ones over and over again. That's what I'm counting on Mr. Trump not to do here. What will it mean in terms of commitment, in terms of policy? Well, Mr. Trump has already successfully shifted the economic onus of the war in Ukraine from the United States of America to the European community. It is now they who are purchasing weapons and weapon systems from the United States and delivering them to Ukraine. And they have committed to doing this. And they are doing it. That's a good thing. It reminds me of President George Bush Sr.'s accomplishment in getting other countries to pay for Desert Storm. Countries, many of them, they had no ability to send military or anything to help, so what'd they do? Pick up part of the tab, pick up the bill. Every little bit helps. So the United States was able to eject Saddam Hussein from Kuwait, but it didn't weigh heavily on our treasury because other nations were footing the bill as part of the alliance that Mr. Bush had built. Well, today, Mr. Trump, in the face of all those who said, oh, he hates NATO, he wants to blow up NATO, he has forged NATO into a stronger alliance than it has been for many years. Now, you may say, oh, Charles, that's a ridiculous thing to say. Don't take my word. Take the word of Hans Stoltenberg, who was, and Mark Rutte, who is Secretary General of NATO. These men who were the chief operating officers of NATO were and are. In Mr. Rutte's case, he holds that position today. He has been repeatedly and vocally very positive about what Mr. Trump has done for and with NATO. Additional countries have joined NATO. Finland, Sweden, both of which have considerable military establishments, particularly Sweden, not to be underestimated by any means. This throws additional military weight on NATO's side in any kind of confrontation with Russia. It's just one more item that might help pry Vladimir Putin off of his course of war. But Mr. Putin is, well, it seems that he's to be depended upon to make demands that simply do not match with reality. His latest one, there's a region in Ukraine known as Donetsk. Mr. Putin wants all of Donetsk. Does he at present occupy all of Donetsk? No. No, over a period of 3 years, his armies have succeeded in occupying part of Donetsk and then been stopped cold by Ukrainian defensive forces. But Mr. Putin is not concerned in that. He wants all of Donetsk. Why? Well, once again, and for those of you who are regular listeners, you've heard me do this before, look back at the Czech Sudeten crisis, the Munich crisis of 1938. The Sudetenland wasn't merely of political significance because it was populated by German peoples. It was of military significance because it was very defensible. This was a mountain range that essentially grew up off the floor of a plain in Germany and was easily militarily defended. In Donetsk today, the Ukrainians have built up a defensive line consisting of emplacements and interlocking defensive positions, which have been holding against the Russians. Wouldn't it be ironic if Vladimir Putin were able to go to the negotiating table and succeed in getting these things without having to fight for them? That's what Hitler was able to do in Munich. He didn't have to take the mountains of the Sudetenland by force. No, he had them signed over and was able to simply walk in. That's what Vladimir Putin wants to do to the defensive positions in the Donetsk region of Ukraine. And Donetsk is centrally located. If these positions go to the Russians, then at any odd time in the future, for the Russians to remount their campaign and attempt to take the rest of Ukraine, a far easier proposition, militarily speaking, because they will no longer have to worry about getting past this particular place. Pokrovsk is the city. It's taken them 17 months to close in on Pokrovsk. The Institute for the Study of War notes the Russians have lost well over 5 divisions worth of armored vehicles and tanks there since October 23. They've suffered as many as 14 to 15,000 casualties a month attempting to take Pokrovsk. If Mr. Putin gains control of this with a ceasefire gambit, Russia will be better positioned to roll into Kharkov and Dnipropetrovsk. Ukraine would have to scramble to set up new defensive lines. All a reason for Mr. Trump to beware of a Russian president promising concessions that are really bids for strategic advantage. There's also a reason to have Ukraine in the room when negotiations happen. Well, I'm depending on Mr. Trump to have this information. I'm getting it out of the Wall Street Journal. Mr. Trump has that available to him. He also has available to him intelligence extracts prepared on a daily basis that are supposed to be more comprehensive and more accurate than anybody can get out of their local newspaper. It is true that from time to time these vaunted sources have fallen on their heads. When George H.W. Bush was president and was getting his morning briefing every day, nothing intimated that the Soviet Union was about to fall apart, which of course it did presently. A monumental geopolitical development. The United States intelligence agencies and apparatus were utterly blindsided. Didn't see it coming at all. So the idea that these people are infallible, I don't believe that. And I certainly wouldn't try to sell it to any of you either. What I look at more instead are enduring geopolitical realities. In the case of, I've made the case for a number of days now, that when I look at Ukraine and Russia, I see Czechoslovakia and Germany in 1938. When I look at Vladimir Putin, I see Adolf Hitler. When I look at Zelensky, I see Eduard Benes, the president of Czechoslovakia. And you'll notice that Benes' name is pretty much lost to history. That's because I don't believe he was at Munich. Rather, instead, Hitler treated with the powers who had the ability to back Benes. Czechoslovakia had alliances, binding alliances with major powers, France, Britain. So it was the French and British leaders who were invited to Munich. Just as today, the Vladimir Putin is not sitting down to meet with Zelensky. No, he's sitting down to meet with Donald Trump. So this places Trump in the position of Neville Chamberlain. My hope is that Mr. Trump is as aware of this as I am, and that he will simply refuse to play Neville Chamberlain. That he will instead take a different approach in dealing with Putin, Hitler, and be polite and gracious, but firm. No, you may not simply seize other countries by force of arms because you have some grandiloquent vision of a Russian empire and how you will restore it. That's not part of what's going on. Of course, in the 21st century, maybe that is part of what's going on. Tomorrow, this meeting between Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump is scheduled to occur. Friday, tomorrow's Friday. Obviously, I don't think we'll be able to discuss it until the following Monday. Unless, of course, it blows up right this minute. Our program is in the mornings, so even if we just had an afternoon show, there would be a better chance that something would be reportable from that meeting. I don't expect anything tomorrow. I expect that it'll be a story over the weekend, and that by Monday we'll probably have a fairly clear idea of what did or did not happen. At that point, I'll be happy to discuss it with you, and I'll be not only ready but eager to hear from you on what you think the significance of those events are. I'll give the telephone number early and often so you can call in and explain to me just exactly what you think it all means. I hope you will join me in hoping that we do not see a repetition of what went on in 1938 in Munich. That Hitler, Putin, will not simply be gifted Ukraine as Hitler was gifted Czechoslovakia in what has gone down as one of the most pusillanimous and counterproductive agreements in the history of diplomacy. Mr. Trump, don't repeat a ghastly mistake. The time is 12 noon. I'll see you tomorrow at 9:06. Episode 183.